Hi, welcome. It's Mark Littlewood from the Business of Software, and I'm joined for the first Google Hangout, Speaker Hangout of 2016 by Stephen Allott. Welcome, Stephen.
Thanks, Mark.
Very nice to see you. I had the pleasure of being interviewed and rejected for a job by Stephen about 15 years ago. Since then, we've stayed in touch. I think he was quite right to let me go, and now we've both done very different things. But Stephen has grown an extraordinary number of software companies over the years. We'll ask him to give a little bit of background in a minute, but he also gave a talk last year at Business of Software Europe on the critical elements in scaling a company. Stephen, do you want to say hi and tell us what you've done to be so good at scaling?
Thanks, Mark. So just to go back to that job interview, you were massively overqualified, Mark, and you've been brilliant in that role, but I thought you were destined for much greater and better things, and which you subsequently proved to be the case. So, and I've been one of your biggest fans ever since. So scaling companies, how did I learn how to scale companies? Well, the main thing I got involved in was a software company called Micromuse, which I joined in 1995, 21 years ago, at the start of the, or before the internet boom started. And there was about 10 people in the Okay.
Yeah, you just cut out, but then came back again. So now I can hear you fine. Hold on a minute. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me, but this isn't. Can you hear me? Thumbs up if so.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly.
So Google's got a mind of its own. Anyway, where should I pick up? Tell me where I left off.
When you started to scale. Talk about Micromuse.
So I learned how to scale software companies globally when I worked for a company called Micromuse from 1995 to 2001. When I joined in 1995, 21 years ago, it was before the internet boom had really started. There were 10 people in the company on the software side, and over the next 6 years, we grew to 800. We grew from 2 countries to something like 19 or 20 countries. We grew from selling mainly directly to selling through not only direct sales, but value-added resellers, OEMs like Cisco, and other channel partners, big systems integrators. So I partly learned how to scale a company by doing it for real. During that process, we went public, so we had the discipline of quarterly reporting to Wall Street. But I also learned how to scale a company by having been trained at McKinsey for 5 years before I joined Micromuse. I worked at McKinsey and learned how to do big organizational changes and growth strategies. And that's exactly what you need to scale a company. You need to have a strategy, and then as you grow and the organization grows from 100 to 500 people, you have to change it. You have to change the structure, the targets, the compensation, the way it works, and you have to be able to do that all the time. And that was an invaluable skill to have learned, to know not only how to change, but also when to change, to recognize the symptoms that the change is overdue. Then to actually research the change, design the change, communicate the change, implement the change, monitor whether the change is successful. You do that repeatedly. And it's sort of a precursor, if you like, of the lean startup and this sort of fail fast sort of thing. I'd actually, that was in my DNA. So I think that was another critical thing in scaling companies. And the third thing I'll mention, and then I'll go back to you for a question mark, but there's always 3 things. I've done it for real. I've learned how to do organizational change. But the third thing in scaling is financial planning. You cannot scale a company properly without having very, very rigorous financial planning, so you know how many people to hire in each function and in what country to hire them in, and how much they're going to produce. If you don't have an incredibly solid financial model against which to do that, you're really at sea. And I learned how to do something called constraint-based planning, using the theory of constraints.
Interesting.
And that's how I managed to do the financial model, projecting how fast we're going to grow and how many heads to hire. And partly in terror of having to give financial estimates to Wall Street, knowing you probably get put in jail if you miss them, I took a great care over the financial modelling. And in fact, I don't think over the 13 quarters where I was the CFO or the president of Micromuse, I don't think I missed a number top or bottom line. And that was partly due to rigorous financial planning, partly due to careful execution and a great product and so forth and good people. But so my third thing is financial modelling. So basically, is I've done it for real. I learned how to do organisational change, and I learned how to plan it.
Interesting. So just on being a public company, and when you're reporting to Wall Street, you're giving guidance on an expectation on your growth. And analysts often take that and start to model where your business is going, and then you report back next quarter. It's obviously bad to miss those numbers. And if we look at what's happened with LinkedIn's results this week, it's had quite a significant impact. But is it bad to exceed the numbers?
So one thing, if you exceed the numbers, you set yourself a higher bar for the next quarter. The critical thing, many of the really big valuations through tech companies are built on growth. So the growth rate is a critical driver in that valuation. And if you overperform, although it drives your growth rate up, which is good, it sets the bar higher for the following quarter, but not just for the following quarter, for all quarters out to infinity.
Yes.
So having predictable growth is what the stock market really values, not volatile growth. They don't like volatile growth because that means they're not sure whether the growth is going to be consistent. What they want is predictable and steady growth. And there's a lot of reasons why growing predictably and steadily is good for management, because you don't run out of capacity to keep your customers happy. You have the right number of people on hand. You can build infrastructure in new countries predictably. So in general, having surprisingly good growth is actually quite a handicap because you've just set the bar high.
Although when I was doing the notes for your, because you're coming back to Business Software Conference Europe this year in Dublin, we'll plug it a little bit more later, but you sent me through, or I took from your slides from last year, some of the numbers that you had at Micromuse, and I think when you took over, when you were leading the company, it was on $1 million a year growth. And it went from there.
Revenue.
Sorry, yes, $1 million a year revenue. I think you tripled it, doubled it, tripled it, doubled it over the subsequent years, and that included time as a public company, which is very unusual because the sort of classic kind of venture capital attractive investment is double, triple, or triple, double.
Yeah.
So that was growing very fast for a very long time.
It was, and it was fantastic fun doing it. We were lucky that we were supplying infrastructure to internet service providers and people running IP networks at a time when they were growing explosively. We sold fault management software, so the stuff you needed to keep the network working was what we sold. So it was mission critical for big telcos, big data networks, and big enterprises.
If you were CFO or president of one of the big public tech companies at the moment, so Google, Amazon, Facebook, we'll add Twitter in just for fun, but Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, what would be the most fun from your perspective to manage? Who's got the most predictable growth? Or is unpredictable growth more fun?
Well, I think Google, now renamed Alphabet, has got to be the place to be. Acre's their top dog at the moment. They just passed Apple in terms of market cap. Apple was the world's leading company by market capitalization for quite a while. But Google's just passed them. Yes. And I think Google's strategy is to make it easier for investors to understand the various businesses they've got. I was reading, I think Google's got 8 distinct businesses, which we all know about: search, YouTube, Google Apps, and Android, and so on. And each of those is probably a jewel. And before, when they were all mushed up together, the investors didn't know how much of the growth was due to each one. But so I think their strategy is informing Alphabet and making it clearer what the components are. They make it easy for investors to understand it and then fully value it, and that seems to be working. So I think it's fun to be number one. Google hire incredibly talented people. My impression is they tend to recruit the top computer scientists. I've read the book on how they manage, or Eric Schmidt's book on how he manages Google, and it sounds like it's a fantastic place to work. It's quite evolutionary, so new product development can happen. If someone fancies having a go at something, and other people want to join them, they give it more resource. So you're allowed to fail at Google. They're doing a lot of exciting stuff. Android's now the world's leading smartphone architecture, and that's a pretty exciting place to be. Think of that, the number one. Partly because Eric Schmidt learned when he was at Sun Microsystems how to fight the standards wars. And just hasten to add more, I worked at Sun Microsystems at the same time as Eric. He probably would.
Was he was in the States, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was he was involved in the Unix division.
Yes.
Sun was a big proponent of Unix, but he fought the operating systems wars between Sun and IBM and Microsoft. And one of the lessons they took away was if you give away your operating system, which they've done with Android, you get more people developing to it. So there's a big game. It's still the same old game for the 20 or 30 years of the standards wars between the open platform Android and I'll just move around in this office here to turn the light back on. You have to.
Excellent. You've gone all purple.
I know. The reason is there you go. The light is on movement sensors. So yes, it only stays on for 20 minutes. Anyway, so Android is an amazing success in creating the leading platform, for which, of course, they charge precisely nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Catch us up. The thing that you were doing most recently, until the end of last year, was the government digital service GCloud project, and you saw a bit of scale there.
That's a fantastic platform that's been built by Government Digital Service, GDS. It's an online catalogue for cloud services that can be bought by public sector buyers that's compliant by default. So if it's in the catalogue, a public sector buyer can buy it in days or even minutes, not months. The current run rate is around £600 million a year, or about $1 billion in just over 3 years, which I think probably makes it Europe's fastest growing internet startup. It's really exceptional. I benchmarked global best practice in that field, and the findings are that it is the leader in scale and functionality worldwide at the moment. So it's a fabulous achievement. And I was lucky that some very good people in the Home Office, a guy called Chris Chant, helped by a lady called Denise McDonough, designed what was then called the Cloud Store. It's now called the GCloud Digital Marketplace. Designed it, and it became a very successful way for my SMEs, suppliers that I was looking after, to get access to government business. So 50% of the £600 million run rate on the GCloud goes directly to SMEs, which is a revolution. Considering that in the normal course of business, about just over 10% of business goes direct to SMEs. So it's a terrific thing to have been able to help.
Yeah. How different was it doing a startup in government as opposed to doing one in, I almost said the real world, but I guess the real world is all around us.
So there are a number of differences actually, Mark, and that's a very insightful question.
It's a mean question.
So I can tell you one thing in government: there's no shortage of capital. You don't have to work with any VCs, which is quite a big difference. And the government's got, in practice, because it's now printing money, the government's got infinite capital. They've also got an incredibly powerful publicity machine, and 26,000 public sector buyers who want to buy cloud services without having to go through a 6-month procurement process. So it's radically different. There are no pesky sort of monthly board reports either.
Yeah.
So that was good. And since I did Micromuse, I've been involved in many startups. I think it's fair to say dozens actually, because I ran a consulting company that helped startups. So probably 100 startups since I did Micromuse, since I left Micromuse in 2001. The GCloud's the first thing I've been involved with since Micromuse, where it's just grown like a weed, and you didn't have to spend your entire life explaining why you're missing your targets.
I love it. So I've got a question coming in here, which is for relatively obvious reasons, anonymous, but it's around change, and someone that's grown a business to a fair size. I mean, this is less than 200 people, but it's gone through various stages. And there's this, I think you have the rule of sevens, which is that your company changes when you're one person and you move on, then 7 people, 49, 300 odd. There are various kind of ways of looking at that, but there are those points in the growth of a business where change is important. Should you be doing all your change at one time? Should you be looking at changing everything in the business, or should you be changing different things as you go? Because, I mean, change, as you know, is hard for some people, and if you change everything at one go, does it just become too discombobulating? And this is someone that's had a few interesting experiences with change, let's put it like that.
Yeah, so different things in a company management change at different rates. At the one end of the spectrum, change should be continuous. Here at Pebble Code now, we do something called Kaizen. It's a Japanese word for good change. It's nothing new. It's simply 30 or 40-year-old Japanese idea of quality circles, or continuous improvement, or GE call it Six Sigma.
Yeah.
In agile development, they call it retrospective. So some things, continuous processes, you should be subject to continuous improvements. It's, again, a similar sort of lean startup, being metrics driven. So quite a lot of things you can change continuously and make incremental improvements. Other things in business, though, you shouldn't change except on quite a longer cycle. So a strategy, suppose you decide that your business strategy is to win the market for software in large telcos. It's going to take you quite a few years to do that properly and see if you're going to succeed in it. That's not something where you can fail fast and sort of decide a month later that you're not going to do target telecoms. So some business strategies might take years to see through. You know, you can sort of make incremental improvements along the way, but the fundamental core idea that you're going to dominate the telecoms or the ISP markets or financial industry, whatever, take quite a while.
Yeah.
So that's on the longer term. That's over the years. You know, that's sort of time horizon over years. The same would be true of products, I think, as well. Software products, enterprise software products, you'd be working on a time scale of a decade. Digital products, online products, digital products, you might be working on a time scale of a couple of years. Sort of mid-term change. So setting sales targets, sales territories, designing organizations. We're much more in the timescale of 6 to 12 months. You can't chop and change around with sales territories and so on much shorter than that, because you don't give people time to organize and attack and see how it works. And similarly with organization structures, if you put someone in charge of a business unit or something, they're not going to have much effect much under a year. So the short answer to your question, there are many different things in an organization, and the change interval will vary according to the nature of those things.
Do you think that, excuse me, the change interval has reduced in businesses, and just because things are moving more quickly. There's a sort of an old saying. I've been trying to track down the source and verify it, but there was an idea that at the beginning of the 20th century, the average life of one of the S&P 100 companies was effectively about 50 years. And 5 years ago, the average life of a company in the S&P was 7 years.
Mm.
How's that changed?
I think you're exactly right, Mark, and a way of thinking about that is that fantastic chart people always do, which is the time after the introduction of a new product or technology to reach 1 million or 1 billion users. And they got it with the telephone, the TV, the mobile phone, and then tablets. And the time to go from nothing to like 1 million users and stuff gets shorter and shorter and shorter. The rate of adoption of new stuff is accelerating, and that's the big thing that's driving the change or the increased rapidity of the business cycle. Is the propagation and adoption of new products is much, much quicker. Another one, of course, is the speed at which information flows around. So you can know what's going on and react much quicker. You don't have to wait for the boats to get back from India. You send out your instructions, and a year later the message comes back that failed.
Yes. Now the messenger's washed back onto the shore.
Now we know instantly that it didn't work. So the communications technology makes a huge difference in the rate of change as well.
Interesting. So questions from Glenda Gillett. Two things. You've scaled a number of businesses. Is there a time when you know you've got a hit? And then follow-up question to that is there a time you would consider the most important in scaling a business?
So you know you've really got a hit when you're competing head-to-head with an incumbent and winning pretty much every time, because you're a tenth the price, or 5 times as good, or can implement in days, not months. So when you're just winning hand over fist everywhere, and everybody wants what you've got, then you really know you've got a massive success on your hands. So it's much later than people might think. People might think you've got a hit when you've got a couple of lighthouse customers. You know, you've won Shell Oil or you've won Goldman Sachs, and you think, well, yeah, everyone else on the planet will want this. That's a good sign, but it's not. You've got a complete runaway success on your hands. And then the other bit of the question is, what's the most critical time in the growth of the company? What is the most critical time? Well, I think it's getting the thing working properly, actually. What I've found with Micromuse is it's very hard to get success rolling. Until then, people lose heart and leave.
Yeah.
And when senior people leave because they get disheartened or they want to join a competitor or do something, it's quite tough to keep going.
Yeah.
And the critical time is actually keeping going when it's still before dawn. It's always darkest before dawn. And if you give up, actually, when it's dark and some critical senior management have just left, then you'll definitely fail. And that's the critical time. Just hanging in there until dawn arrives and you can then see your way into the future. I'd say that's the critical time, because if you give up, the company will die.
Yeah, and that's a tough time as a leader, right? What do you do to look inside yourself, and what gives you the strength to carry on smiling and keep the vision?
Well, if I think of some of the challenges I faced at Micromuse, one big one was when the major product architect, who had been there before I joined, decided to leave, and that was pretty stressful time because the product at that time still didn't work, even though we sold it to some very big, famous customers. So the product didn't actually work. The guy who designed it had gone. that also obviously made a big hole in our story with our investors. That was a pretty dark time.
Mm.
And in fact, what happened is other techies in the company rose to the challenge. So the people filled the gap, overperformed. We finally fixed the product and kept going.
Yeah.
But I guess what kept me going at that point was just naivety. I should have been more worried than I was.
Yeah, yeah. And Micromuse had a fairly mercurial founder.
He did, yeah. He was so mercurial that he drove his McLaren road car, a £600,000 McLaren road car, into a tree and got on the front page of the Daily Mail, which was quite exciting. Wow. And he used to come to work wearing leather trousers and had his large Italian motorbike in reception. That so generally created a sort of a funky atmosphere around the company. But actually, what that did was completely fool the British investors. So even though Micromuse is the most valuable, I'm going to say it again now because it's my favourite phrase, but the most valuable organically grown software company ever to come out of the United Kingdom, all the leading British VC firms on the day passed on it, and which I thought was very unimpressive. And I think the main reason they did was that our mercurial founder used to come to work with leather trousers. Wearing the leather trousers, I hasten to add, they were on his body, and used to park his motorbike in the reception in Putney, in the office. So I think that put everybody off.
Do you know, that's changed a lot. Funnily enough, I was driving to work this morning and was listening to the Today programme, and Eileen So from Tech City and Neil Reimer were on. There's a new Tech City report out about clusters across the UK. But Neil was saying that actually the thing that they look for at Index in a founder is almost a charisma, it's an attitude rather than a set of skills. And Eileen says ideally you want both.
Some of the world's leading companies have got some pretty mercurial founders. But 21 years ago, when I was trying to raise money for Micromuse from the then leading British VC firms of the day, they passed on it. Then, just to complete the story, when they noticed how successful we become, they decided to invest in our competitors, which we then proceeded to completely destroy. So, well done.
Funny. So, coming back to scaling and hiring, one of the things you mentioned about noticing that when you're going up against, this is the tipping point for a successful business, you're going up against your incumbents and you're winning every time. That's pretty demoralizing for the incumbents. Presumably that then means that you have a lot more choice about who you hire within your sales team. I mean, you could start hiring more competitors. Is that part of the...
Well, success momentum builds. What great salespeople want to join is the winner. They want to make money. And one of the hallmarks of great salespeople is they'll do very careful due diligence on the company before they join it. So as you start to win in the marketplace, one of the best hires we made was in California. We just beaten, and this was in late 1998, we just beaten Computer Associates, which is one of our major competitors, along with HP and IBM, on a massive deal. And the sales manager for the West Coast at Computer Associates just phoned me up and said he lost to us and he wanted to join. And he was an absolute rock star. He was called Mike Donahue, an American. Scratch golfer, very charming, unbelievably hardworking. Just phoned up. So no headhunter fee, no hiring process. I was in San Francisco, he came into the office, I interviewed him, just realized on the spot that he was top class, and he very soon became our global head of sales.
Wow. On the flip side of that, you get a lot of people coming in then with great CVs because they've had 2-3 years at, I don't know, Microsoft, Oracle, I mean, they've got a kind of real blue chip background. But it must be quite hard to filter out the ones that are not very good because they all look quite good on paper.
So I just used one of the things we did at Micromuse was really invest a lot of time in hiring good people, and I just copied the McKinsey recruitment process, partly because that's what I was used to, which involved just like a whole ton of interviews and a sort of rigorous scoring system on 3 or 4 dimensions, and then discussing each candidate as a group quite carefully afterwards. And that turned out to be a very good way of hiring good people. The main thing I learned, and the lesson I'll pass to people watching this, is when you're trying to hire great people, just remember you're selling, not buying. So if you're a small, no-name company competing with the world leaders like Apple and Google, you've got to sell to them. You've got to convince top-quality people to come to work for somewhere they've never heard of. So you're selling, not buying. So you've got to attract them. You've got to stimulate their interest in your organization. Then when you, in communication with them, have some argument about why you're going to be a great place to work. When they come to the interview process, you've got to put your best people in front of them, so they actually think that the other staff in the company are impressive, sort of people they want to work with. When you decide you want to hire them, you've got to make an offer quickly and efficiently, because they'll probably get snapped up. They're spending a week arguing about their package isn't going to work when you're trying to hire them. You've got to put a package in front of them straight away, take them out for dinner, and get them signed up on the spot. And when I joined Micromuse, I got signed up over the weekend. I contacted the chairman on the Friday and said it looks interesting, and he had me signed up by Monday.
You're not one for rash decisions generally. Okay, question. Do you think scaling is poisonous? Can a business maintain its DNA going from 1,000 to 10,000 to 1 million to 10 million a month?
No, clearly it can't. And the precious sort of feeling you get when there's 50 people and they all know each other and they're all in one building and they're fighting the world is never going to be the same when there's 5,000 people in the company. Clearly that founder spirit gets diluted, and often the first 50 in a company feel quite bad about the fact that their little magic thing gets diluted. In fact, they get forgotten and they often feel unrecognized. I remember this at Sun Microsystems when I joined them. The department I worked in, the guy had been the head of it, the original head of that department, was very aggrieved a few years later when he got passed over for being the boss of it, because the company was much bigger and they wanted a much better person, but he was really bitter about the fact that he was no longer the top guy. So it can be quite poisonous for the original founding group. And
are there any thoughts on dealing with that? I mean, clearly not everyone can grow at the same speed that a company grows, and so there are some people that come in and grow into a position and they have a career velocity that allows them to grow with the business. There are some people that don't. What's best for the team?
So, Mark, you're raising really what's one of the hardest and can be most emotionally distressing things you have to do as management when you're growing, is that people who've been loyal, effective, good people working for you just are no longer, haven't grown as fast as the job. You've got to tell them that they're no longer the head of this or they're in charge of that, and you're going to hire over their head. And that's an incredibly tough message to give someone who's really served the company very loyally and effectively. There's also a practical question is, do you go to them and say, hey mate, you're a lame duck, I'm going to hire over your head, and risk their demotivation? Do you go to them, do you try and hire a replacement in secret, and then one Monday morning the new person turns up in their desk and you say to, hey Mark, you know you were head of finance on Friday, well you're not anymore, you're deputy head of finance. So do you go around them, or do you sack them, even though they're, or do you have, so it's incredibly difficult actually just to manage the practical side of the transition. And it happens all the time. If you're in a really successful high growth company, most of the senior executives will lose their position in the hierarchy. Most of them. I've got a chart. When I present the sort of Micromuse story, I've got a chart showing how the top management team changed over the 6 years I was there. And what's incredibly striking is the rate of turnover amongst the senior executives is very high.
Yeah. Is that and that? I mean, sometimes that's inevitable. What's the norm from your sense in terms of how that works? I mean, there's always going to be some kind of churn, even in the most perfectly run company, for whatever reason. But
Yeah, I've never studied it analytically, Mark, to see what's the norm rate of attrition among senior executives in really successful scale-up companies, because there's so few in the UK. But if I was to guess, I'd say the norm is a very high rate of churn, actually, much higher than people think. We all sort of come across the CEO, the founder gets replaced by an outside CEO, and then if they're going to go public, you might get another CEO. So we're sort of more familiar with the change at CEO level. But all the other senior executives, finance, sales, marketing, engineering, my guess is in really high growth companies, they turn over quite a lot. It's quite rare that the Larry Ellison or the Mark Zuckerberg or the Sergey Brin go the distance, or the Steve Jobs.
Well, it's interesting, and there is a bit of confirmation bias there, isn't there? Because if you look at some of the biggest companies, so, I mean, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, are all essentially still run, or were, until Steve Jobs died, run by their founders. Yeah. That doesn't mean, and this is taken by some founders of companies to mean that kicking them out as CEO is a bad thing. It just so happens that some of the very biggest companies do have founder CEOs, and I think Elon Musk as well.
Yeah, Michael Dell, I'd add to the list.
Yes. So they're all there. They're all doing. Those very big companies do have founder CEOs or founder senior execs. But equally, if you look at what's happening with Twitter, that's been kind of up and down. And Jack Dorsey's running Twitter and Square at the moment. Can you run two successful public companies at the same time?
No, not at all. I think that what's the lesson to be learned from the fact that Larry Ellison, Michael Dell, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, however you pronounce it, Steve Jobs and so on, went the distance. I think that probably the lesson is if you've got a really exceptional person who can grow at the same rate of one of these companies, then you've got a very good chance of going the distance. Not many companies do that.
Yeah.
If you have to have a rotation of CEOs, because you get chop and change in vision. I mean, look at Apple. When Scully was running Apple, they really drifted.
Yeah.
It's only when Jobs got back in the driving seat that they really then turned into the world's most valuable company.
Yeah. So how does Elon Musk do it? I mean, he's running SpaceX, he's running Tesla. He seems like almost superhuman. I know he wants to die on Mars, but not on impact.
Do you know if is he CEO of all those? Has he got a COO? What's the structure? I don't know.
I think he's CEO of both, but I mean, there's a pretty well-established team around both of them, clearly.
Well, I can say there's a fantastic team at Tesla because Mike Taylor, who's the CFO at Tesla, used to work for me, so I can personally vouch for the fact that he's outstanding, and I hope he's watching, Mike.
Excellent. Okay, other questions? So there was one around, actually no, I think that's probably more one for later around sales comp and things like that, but because that could actually go into quite a long thing. I'm just recapping on the change thing that we were talking about before, and kind of continuous change. You're saying really not to change everything in one go.
You have to change things at each thing at the right time.
Right.
Think about it, and some things change continuously. Some you have to wait a while to see how they work, and some things you have to wait a long time to see if they work.
Cool. One of the things we were talking about the other day was some of the new tools that you're using to manage your business. You came up with Trello, which is a great tool. I mean, we use it internally. I probably should use it more than I am compared to everybody else. What is great about Trello? What is great about the new kind of business information systems that you're using that has made such a difference to you now?
So at Pebble Code, where I work now, we're completely cloud-based in all the board papers.
Yeah.
And that is such a revolution. I mean, it's fantastic not to have any board papers at all.
Yeah.
You don't have any physical papers. You don't have a huge PDF to read. So the way the board meetings work are, we open up Trello.
Yeah.
And for people who don't know, Trello is screen-based equivalent of a Kanban post-it notes on the wall.
Yeah.
But which all members of the team can look at. It's absolutely brilliant, and I don't think people have really appreciated just what a revolution Trello is in team management. It's a cloud-based thing where you have cards on the wall and you can move them up and down into different buckets. So we open up Trello, and one of the cards in Trello is the board agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone, at the moment, we crowdsource the board agenda. At the start of the board meeting, we move it around and decide what the agenda is, and edit it. And then we get the routine report. So the first routine report we put up is called the flash report, which is on one page is the sales, bookings, in other words, how's the sales looking for the quarter, how's the impact looking for the quarter, how's the cash looking for the quarter, how's the collections, how the hiring, and how's the utilization. So I run the company on 6 numbers. What's the target? Are we going to hit it? If we're going to miss, by how much does it change on the week? And that's online. So we just each look at that on our machine, and you can tell in an instant where the things are going. Then we look at our sales forecast, which is a Google Docs spreadsheet, which we all look at, and that has all the information I like in it. I really don't believe in sales forecasting from Salesforce.com or on some of these CRMs. I think you can do everything you need on a spreadsheet. Depends on the type of the business you're running, obviously. We have our accounting on Xero, which is, I think, New Zealand's leading tech company now. Mm-hmm. So all the accounting is cloud-based. All the hirings process is cloud-based. And then we do Kaizen. We fill in a Trello card, what went well in the meeting, how to improve next time. We score it in real time. And then the next week we look at Kaizen from the previous week. Did we take on board the improvements we suggested? It's a real revolution and incredibly efficient. You can have a completely cloud-based management system.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the elements are out there now, and most businesses that are starting off have a massive advantage over legacy businesses that have been around for a long time, because so much of their management information systems and management systems are relatively old and kind of baked into inefficient systems. So there's another, I think you remember Dwayne Jackson, who founded Cashflow and spoke at Business of Software Europe last year. He now is doing a company called Supdates, which is shareholder updates, so supdates.com. And that is something that's designed just to make all of the board reporting and shareholder reporting really simple, but it's just pulling stuff in from very simple systems, and those sort of things I think are making, there are a ton of things that are making a big difference. If you were starting a business from scratch now, would you have everything in the cloud?
Yeah, and definitely. When you say everything in the cloud, do you mean management reporting definitely in the cloud?
I mean, what would you not have in the cloud in terms of any of the software, any of the?
Well, I'm still not clear on actually email, because being able to do email offline like you can with Outlook when you're on the tube or the plane is actually quite good. And sometimes with Google Mail, if you're not connected, it's quite hard to and in fact, I don't even know whether you can.
They do have offline.
I think you can do Google Mail offline. Actually, you can. Yeah, I was just the other day.
Yes, I was working from home a few weeks ago, and was there one morning. And the only downside about cloud is they dug up the road and went through the internet cables. So if you don't have internet and you're cloud-based, you really are struggling. But
for me, being on a train, so many trains have terrible internet connections.
Yeah.
If you can't get your documents, if you can't edit a PowerPoint presentation on your way to Cambridge, it's in the cloud, that could be pretty annoying. So there's a couple of minor practical issues with cloud, but
yeah.
for office, yeah. So we're not quite there yet. Maybe there are workarounds for that. I don't know. Mirroring it on your machine or something. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. No. I think there are a few workarounds. Got a quick question here, which is Nigel Ainscoe. On sales compensation, on the BoS slides, there's a sales comp plan, and I know you know the slides. So that, could you please explain how it works in terms that a non-salesperson understands? Not sure what you mean by that, Nigel, but
I'll try. Let me try.
Give it a go. Yeah.
So the first thing is having quarterly targets. All other things being equal, quarterly targets are the way to go. I did some research, and I think one of the biggest weaknesses in British tech companies is annual targets and annual reporting. Or annual targets with monthly updates driven by the accountants is the reason why American companies win. So
yeah.
All things being equal, quarterly targets are the way to go. There could be situations where shorter term, monthly or annual are more suitable, but by and large, quarterly targets is the way to go. The next thing on Salesforce targeting and comp is to pay people to hit their target. In other words, a straight commission rate doesn't do it because nothing changes when they go past their target. You've got to hand them a check when they hit their target, and a check that's big enough that their wife asks them about it. That's the basic thing to do. So if they get home every night and their wife's saying, "Are you going to make the £10,000 bonus for hitting your quarterly target?" They'll think about it, or their partner or their husband or whatever nowadays. So pay people to hit the target. Next, you want to pay some commission on the way up to the target, a bonus at target, and then you want to pay an accelerated rate of commission over target to keep them selling once they've made it and they don't sandbag their orders for the next quarter. And that's it. It's that simple.
Okay, Nigel, I know you are listening, so maybe come back if you've got a follow-up on that one. But that sounded simple enough. It's not the only way, and I think there's a fantastic. I mean, I'm sitting in Redgate at the moment, and they have a different view, and it's a different type of business and different type of culture.
Yeah.
I know you've been involved in the business, so they had salespeople and they had targets, and they then decided not to comp them on their targets, and they comp everybody across the business on and reward them and give them a bonus based on the company performance rather than just the salespeople.
Yeah, there's multiple things that work. So having Salesforce with targets can work. Having staff just paid salaries with reasonable promotion works. That's called lockstep in a firm of solicitors.
Yes.
Having an employee-owned co-op works. There's plenty of systems that work.
One final question, because we are running close to time, but this is something that a couple of people have asked me about this week, and I haven't really had an answer. So if you can kind of give me the secret sauce, I can go back to them and go. Number of people have got a beachhead in a bunch of companies. They're established organizations, they're selling software into particular bits of the organization. They want to move in and take on or get more customers within the businesses that they exist in. How do you kind of go about turning that into a process, turning that into a model? Because that's a different sort of sale, isn't it, than finding your enterprise customer in the first place.
Yeah, you call that account development. So you've got a beachhead inside a large customer. How do you grow it? And the heart there is something called an account plan.
Yeah.
So the person who's responsible for that account, supervised by their manager or as a CEO or some grown up in the company, should prepare an account plan, which is, I usually have them in 3 buckets. Something about what you've sold. The first bucket is what you've already sold them. So in other words, your position inside that account. The second big bucket is the position the company's in. What are the forces at work? How are their competitors doing? Are they growing or losing? What's happening to their industry? So in other words, how does it feel to be a senior manager in that company?
Yeah.
What are the drivers? In other words, what's the customer situation? And the third bucket is, so what are you going to do? And you do that analysis, and for big accounts, you might have a workshop with your account team all present there and have some kind of brainstorm or stuff to come up with the account plan. So you have a plan, and then you execute it. And there are many common tactics, but if you've got a sort of diverse set of users inside a large account, you might have a user group, an internal user group. This is something we did at BT in the early days of Micromuse. We had like 6 or 7 customers across BT, which was a 200,000 or 300,000 person organization. We had a whole day conference of our internal customers, so they discussed how they used the products, what worked, what didn't. But the main thing was they got confidence that this was a good thing to do, and they formed a network inside the company, and that was a big key to its expanding its usage. So if you network the customer, another thing that the sales and account people do is they act as the communications mechanism between bits of a customer. So you might find, Morgan Stanley in London wouldn't necessarily routinely talk to Morgan Stanley in New York about the technical details of how they were using some software tool.
Yeah.
But you as a vendor would. You're the catalyst. You actually help them share valuable information inside the customer. And that's a useful thing to do. So the main message, how you grow an account, have an account plan, execute it, do sensible stuff.
Fantastic. Stephen, thank you so much. It's always fun, and I always learn listening to you and asking questions. I know we've had a lot of people who've said great things about the talk that you gave last year at Business of Software. This year in Dublin, you're coming back. We're very excited to have you, and you're going to be talking a little bit about what's happening in larger organizations and how smaller software...
I think, isn't it?
Digital transformation, yeah. And the opportunities for some of the smaller startup companies to sell into bigger organizations, which is something that quite a few people struggle with. So I'm really, really looking forward to seeing you there. Tickets went on sale today, which is very exciting for us, and we were doing I think a little deal on the first 50 tickets. I don't know if there are any left yet, because I don't touch this computer screen at the moment, because we'll lose contact. But yeah, it's very, very exciting what has been going on over in Dublin. I think there are a huge amount of companies spreading out. It's not just the LinkedIns and Googles and all the tax avoiders setting up business over there. There's a very vibrant software ecosystem over there without them as well. So we're very excited to be going. Are there any people that we should be getting in touch with in Ireland that should be coming along and listening to what you're doing?
Well, there's lots of great Irish companies, not just in the Republic, but actually in the north as well.
Yes.
Equinity and Kainos and Learning Pool.
Yeah.
Plus, I was fortunate enough a couple of weeks ago to get invited over by the Irish Development Agency to go to Dublin to do a seminar for Irish companies that want to sell through the GCloud, and they had 20 or 30. Gavin McWhirter at the Irish Development Agency had 20 or 30 outstanding Irish software companies.
Oh, excellent.
Who were doing amazing things.
I think I will follow up with that separately, because we've had a few conversations with the IDA, but different bits of it, and yeah, would be really nice to get in touch with those. Stephen, is there anything that we can do for you? Is there anything that people from BoS can help you with?
Keep asking me back. I've had loads of good feedback from last summer in Cambridge. Lots of great business connections I've made since. People have said, I saw your talk, and can we come and have a chat, and so on. So it was a fantastically valuable opportunity for me, Mark. So thanks for that, and do keep inviting me back.
Well, we will. We'll see how it goes this time first, but...
Maybe I was right not to hire you all those years.
Exactly. Stephen, great to talk to you, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Cheers, and bye-bye.
Take very good care. Thanks. Bye.